One of the first things we need to do as we get ready to talk about the teaching strategy we're going to focus on this year in the Empowered program is to look at what the research says. We always want to back up what we're doing with sound research. We know that in education today there are a ton of research studies that come out almost every day. So it can be difficult to know what's good research and what's bad research. John Hattie says that in education, almost everything that we try to do is good and is done for the right reasons. But what we need to do is really look at what gives us the biggest bang for our buck, for our time, and for our students. So in order to do that, let's talk about the different types of research studies that there are. Starting down at the bottom with a case report. If someone comes to you and says, I have a case report that says this particular piece of software has an effect size of 0.2 and it's going to increase reading scores by 100%, well, that sounds really good. The question you have to ask yourself is, what's a case report? And a case report is when you take 2, 3, 4, 5 kids and you have them in the study and then you publish those results. So it's a very limited base of individuals. And you can see all the different types of studies there, but what we're looking for is at the top, the meta-analysis. A meta-analysis looks at multiple studies, all sorts of different studies that have been done on that topic, and it combines all of those results and comes up with an effect size. The easy way to remember that about a meta-analysis is more is better. The more studies done, the more reliable the research is. John Hattie is a researcher, and he has written a number of books over the years, starting with Visible Learning, where he talks about everything that we do in education. And what Hattie did for the past 25 years, he has looked at more than 1,500 meta-analyses with more than 90,000 educational studies that involved more than 300 million students from around the world. So his research is valid. It has a very large base, it's over time, and it includes so many different studies. And what he was trying to determine was what makes the biggest difference in accelerating student learning. So this is definitely something we want to pay attention to. And what he came up with was the effect size of a whole bunch of different strategies. So you'll notice down here in the bottom of the screen, you see the red area. And it says if you are below 0, you have an effect size of below 0, that actually means that students exposed to that strategy will lose learning. Okay, it's a bad thing. They're actually going to lose learning. If you have an effect size of 0 to 0.15, that's the same amount of learning that a student would get by not going to school at all, but just maturing over the course of a year. Okay. If you look in the orange section, that's from a 0.15 effect size to a 0.4 effect size. That's the same amount of learning you would expect to see over a year of learning for students. Okay. So anything that is below a 0.4, that really doesn't have that big an effect. So if someone comes to you and says, I have a new textbook and it has a 0.32 effect size, you're going to go, don't really care, because that's what we're going to accomplish just by having the kid go to school for a year anyway. What we want is anything that's greater than 0.4 for an effect size. That means it's going to have more influence on accelerating student learning than anything else. Okay? So the easy way for me to remember it is I'm looking for anything that's 0.5 or above, but anything above 0.4 is what we want to look at for an effect size. So what Hattie did then, once he'd established the effect sizes, was he ranked 262 different teaching strategies or initiatives or programs that we try in education. And I'm just showing you the very top of the list right now. And he ranked them from top to bottom of everything that we try. Things from summer school to RTI to the use of technology, all sorts of things, and looked at the effect size of each one. And if you remember, the effect size we're looking for is 0.4 or higher. Okay, So just for example, looking at collective teacher efficacy here, this very top one, which has an effect size of 1.57, that means you're going to get basically 3 years of growth for every year of schooling if you implemented collective teacher efficacy and you implemented it well. So that's how the effect size works, and that is what Hattie's research is based on. Now, some of these, which you would say, okay, well, let's do collective teacher efficacy because it has the biggest bang for the buck, and it does. The difficulty is collective teacher efficacy is not something that just one or a few teachers can implement. It is something that the entire campus, every person on the school district campus has to implement. So it can be a little bit harder to do. What we're going to target this year for your campus in the Empowered program is reciprocal teaching, which has a 0.74 effect size. Doesn't sound as great as 1.57, but you're still going to get way over the normal growth that you would see in a child for 1 year. So that's a little bit about John Hattie, why we use his work to look at the research, what effect size is, and what you'll be studying this year.